Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Pursuit. I'm your host, Ben Spangle, and today we're going to be talking leadership. Leadership is one of those conversations that is more needed than ever before. I've got an expert with me today, Walt Carter. Walt is a change leadership expert specifically, so we're going to dive into that stuff. And as I learned a little bit about Walt, he's got his book. He's the author of We Can't Stay Here, which is all change leadership lessons. He's got an upcoming book, which we may talk a little bit about later today too. And, I think one of the things that's unique is he's really spent the last 36 plus years running his own private leadership lab and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So I'm excited for that conversation. Walt, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure, Ben. Happy to join you.
Yeah. So why don't we begin? Leadership's a big topic. There's a lot of ways we can take it. Maybe give us the brief version of your journey into this world.
It's not an unusual one, I don't think, in the sense that I grew up as a military brat. My dad was a career enlisted guy in the U.S. Air Force. So I moved, every 2 or 3 years, we would go into a new duty station with Dad. And, ultimately, when I graduated from college with my physics degree, I went into the Air Force because truthfully, that's what everybody in our family did back then. We all went into the military.
Okay.
My grandfather was in the Army Air Corps, for instance, before my dad joined the Air Force when he was 18. I joined when I got my degree. And I went into what is a pretty well-developed, well-established leadership system, right?
Sure.
So as a leader in the military, and truly at every level, right? Regardless of whether you're the general at the top of the food chain or you're the private or the airman down at the bottom, we teach leadership in the military at every level, right? And then I went through some really great jobs in the Air Force. I jokingly do tell people I'm a card-carrying rocket scientist that's actually worked on rockets.
Very cool.
Rockets could wipe out cities. I spent a lot of time thinking about global thermonuclear warfare. I flew on Looking Glass, which is an airborne command and control plane, for 3 years, running logistics for the battle staff to manage World War III with the president and National Command Authority. Kind of an interesting job.
For sure.
Then I went up to Canadian NORAD headquarters for about a year to help the Canadians understand how to use North American fighter packages from our Guard and Reserve bases under the NORAD treaty. So we would go all across the top of Canada and Alaska to see the forward operating locations and bases up there. And back then we were running the Soviet Bear bombers out of our airspace to keep them from coming over the top of the poles to attack us. And at the end of that year, though, we were inviting those Soviets to land those Bear bombers at our bases, and we would exchange uniform items. And effectively, the Cold War was over. Right? They would buy Labatt's Blue Beer at the Canadian Exchange and some fur coats, and we'd send them back on their way. So I got out in '92. And I went into corporate America, right? And I'm kind of a technical guy, so I went into the technical route, and I became, a CIO, Chief Information Officer, and today I'm a Chief Digital Officer / CIO, which means I have marketing. So I've been a Chief Marketing Officer at 2 other companies, and CIO, and today I'm a Chief Digital Officer and CIO. So I kind of come at the world from a techie's perspective. But along the way, I noticed 2 things that were really important. And one of those was there's no leadership system outside of the military, anything like what I had in the military, nothing. And I was working with some really big companies back in the early days, so Fidelity, Delta Airlines, Northwest Airlines. I mean, big companies.
For sure.
And I'm looking, where's the leadership system? How does a leader in this system know what they're accountable for? How do they know what they're going to be measured on? The other thing that I found out, and this is more back to, the technical part of my learning, is that projects are hard. Creating value with people is hard. The technology is not hard.
Mm-hmm.
If you give me enough time and money, I'll figure out how to solve the technology problem. There are very
Mm-hmm.
few problems that are insurmountable technology problems. It's usually the problem of the politics in the organization, getting the agendas lined up, getting people to want to do the change or move to the new system or whatever, right? So the people side is a lot more complex than the technology side, and
Yeah.
and now here I am. I've just spent 40 years since I first started writing code in college. And I'm going, yeah, and the coding is not the problem. It's really the people. How do I get the people? And this ties all back to the first book and the second book, which is leadership. It's getting change done in an organization, creating value in an organization. It's all about leading.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I also would tell you it's all about following, and that's what the second book's about. It's about following. It's not necessarily about being the top dog in the food chain. It's being somebody that's been assigned a job to lead some change or create some new value for the organization.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do it? And how do you do it without that grand poobah title that
Mm-hmm.
lets you just direct everybody? And one of the other things I'll just tell you that's most interesting to me, I tell people all the time, you can't force a human being to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Love them into position, but as soon as you go to force, you're going to meet resistance, because that's how humans work. Humans
For sure.
are wired to resist. So
Yep.
if you try to manipulate or extort or coerce or any kind of force move that you're going to bring, they fight you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing because in leadership, whether it's a corporate setting or you're running your own company, as many of the listeners are too, ultimately, in order to move the needle, I mean, we need people at all levels raising up in their leadership. And I think what you're talking about too is how do you get organizations, how do you build that culture that people are leading at every level, whether they've got, the top title, whether they're the boss, whether they're the owner, whether whatever, how do we get them to lead? And nobody wants to be forced anything. So it's an interesting thing in leading. I know in my own business, I mean, we all of our teammates are contractors, so nobody's an employee. So we always talk about leading a volunteer army. I mean, no one has to be there, but I guess that's true in the corporate world too. They could go get a different job, right?
Well,
So,
it's even true in the military. I mean, one of the first big teaching steps in the officer training program that I went through was, if you have to go to your shoulder and point to your rank to get what you want done, you've already lost the argument, right? If your only ability to get things done is to give orders and direct, right? You're not going to win the hearts and minds of your troops. That's just not going to happen, right? And they may have to agree with you and salute and move off, but they're going to find all kind of reasons why your way can't be the way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They're going to start looking for excuses almost immediately. So if you go to rank as your mechanism for getting things done,
Yeah.
you lose almost every time. And that's, again, it's built into our training. We all know that as we're going through that leadership program. Who told you that on the outside, right? Who shared that information with you, Ben, in your career? And having worked with a lot of nonprofits over the years, and a lot of volunteer organizations. As a matter of fact, one here in Atlanta called Points of Light that I did some work with years ago, the world's largest volunteer organization, headquartered here in Atlanta.
Wow.
Corralling up your cats and herding your cats can be very difficult. You've got to find that connection to, really, I call it the spirit and heart of that individual contributor in order to get them to want to participate and bring their A game. And not just phone it in, right?
Let's expand on that right there. So you want to get to their spirit and their heart. How do you start to do that? Because I think anyone listening say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if they're deeply engaged, then of course more meaningful work is going to happen, better end result for the customer, the clients, everything. So how do you start to reach people's spirit and heart in leadership?
So it's a really, really hard thing. I'm going to tell you that it's really, really hard, and it's particularly hard for the folks like our audience that are leaders in their businesses, that are in charge. Because it's not efficient, and I'll tell you what it is real quick. Right, you have to go out and ask and listen. And if you listen first and ask, hey, look, I've got some ideas about some things that are not quite where we need them to be. We need to move some things around, make some changes. But I don't want to just tell you what we're going to do. I want to hear from you. Do you agree that this is not as good as it could be yet, and that there might be some ways we could improve this situation? What do you think? Right. And if you just stop right there and listen, and then, talk back to them to make sure that you're understanding what they're saying, not just leading with, okay, here's what I want to have happen, and here's how I want it to happen, and here's when I need it to happen by. Right. You have to actually spend the time with the people that are going to be affected by the change to listen to them. Now, you don't actually have to do what they suggest. You have to work toward a solution with all of those different participants, right? And it's more important that they have a voice than it is that you have agreement with them necessarily, right? Because again, as a leader, as our audience is mostly leaders here in the organization, you know things and see things from your level that maybe the guys at the bottom of the food chain can't see, don't know about. It's not in their normal purview, right? They're not focused on the stuff happening outside the business, market conditions, what the Fed's doing with the money. They don't care about that so much. They care about what's going on in their job. So part of this conversation that you have to have, in my humble but totally accurate opinion, is you have to move into that conversation, that dialogue, and it's got to be both ways. They got to know that you heard them and that you understood what they said, and then you can start to move together to craft the solution, right? And it may be something that you came to the table with, but you've heard this over and over again. It has to be their idea. It can't be your idea. It's got to be our idea. Right. And if we all collaborated on it together, even when the top guy finally says, okay, well, then I think that makes the most sense. Let's do it this way. Here's when we need to have it done. And, who's got the lead on this? Who's going to lead this thing? And if it's a volunteer, hey, right. And then you got to go into the higher gear, which is now got to train, equip, and lead and be ready to get out of the way. And jump in when I need to, right? And so again, leadership is an active word. It's not a passive word. It's a very active word.
And I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that what you're teaching too is the idea of making it collaborative in a way that people are involved in those decisions and feeling heard and everything. Selling's not really any different. I think some of the most effective selling, I work in a sales business, right? Some of the most effective selling is where it's not you telling the prospect this is what they need, but instead it's listening, asking, and then coming together. So it's interesting, the parallels. And in a lot of ways, I mean, sales is leadership, right? It's leading people to a decision, right? So I think
it is. And the guys and the gals that do it the best really are collaborative, right? They are not just a solution looking for a place to park. They're looking for a place where their solution can really deliver value. And so I think the guys and gals out there in sales that are truly the best salespeople are actually the best collaborators. They're the best listeners.
Great way.
Right. And listener skills should be much more highly valued than communication skills. And, we think communication is a one-way thing, but it's really not. If they didn't understand what you said and how you said it, your heart's intent, right? Then you miscommunicated, right? Right. You didn't communicate. And you may be transmitting perfectly, but if their receiver's not on your frequency, you missed it, right? One of the other things I'd share, a good friend of mine, a guy named Alan Schaefer, has a company called Banding People Together. Alan is a former rock star that had a recording deal with his band and then realized they weren't going to go to the next level, right? So he said, but I got this music thing and I want to teach, and I want to do my thing. But he came up with a notion of training teams on collaboration using the model of a band going into a recording studio to make an album. And and everybody in the band's got different skills and different instruments, and the singers don't necessarily play the instruments, the drummers doing his own thing, the bass player's doing his own thing, lead guitar, whatever, right? And he says, but you got to agree up front on, hey, look, recording time is expensive, guys. We can't be in there dawdling.
Right.
We got to get in, make the best album we can, get out without spending a fortune here so we can actually make money from this thing. So here's how we're going to do it, right? So every member of the team's got a voice. We're all going to contribute in our album. And then you start thinking about, well, but what if you're the Beatles, right? And John and Paul write all the songs, and Ringo and George don't write the songs, but they're on all the songs, right? How do you participate when there's a different level of contribution from the people that are still key to the band, right? And and this is ultimately the leader's challenge, I think, is how do we know how to measure value of contribution from the different people on our teams, right? And I think this is one of the great untapped mysteries of our time. We still don't do that very well across the board, in my opinion. We don't know how to value contribution correctly. And the models that we have are stuck in the past, right? So we still pay people by the hour, or even your contract resources, right? They're probably being paid by the hour, or some flat fee that's relatively easy to map to an hourly rate.
Yeah.
Right. And and so, but from the neck up, we shouldn't be doing that. It should be about the value of the contribution to the project. In my opinion, but that's a completely different conversation. I don't have any really good solutions to that one yet, because I just don't see any good models yet.
My business specifically, they're commissioned, so it's a little bit different than that, but I understand where you're coming from with that. And I think one of the things I'm curious your perspective on, why do you think more people at any level, why do you think more people don't step into leadership where they really do start leading at a higher level?
So, most of the time in our organizations, what we wind up doing is promoting somebody into leadership that's really good at the task that they're going to be leading the group of. And, and we've even got, some of that figured out in the military, because we figured out a long time ago that a guy that's really gifted at ordnance disposal, right? A bomb diffuser,
sure,
may not make the best leader of the bomb diffuser squad.
Yeah.
Right. He's really, really good under pressure, really, really great at bomb diffusing. And by the way, doesn't want to be the leader. So if you promote him into that position, because he's got the most seniority, he's got the most experience, and he doesn't want the job, you probably just wrecked your whole bomb disposal group, right?
I can only imagine. Yeah.
So in the military, we created a specialist track, and we said, you know what? You can go all the way to the top in the rank structure by just being the best bomb disposal guy of all times, right?
Oh, interesting.
Go right up the rank as a bomb disposal guy. You don't have to go on the leadership track. We're going to keep you on the specialist track.
But the recognition is there as progressing. Yeah.
And yet, if you want to jump off the specialist track and over here to the leadership track, that's always an opportunity for you. And again, in the military, you're going to get leadership training whether you want it or not, all the way through your career. And so, and again, that's why you have stories like Alvin York from World War I, or Audie Murphy from World War II, or Joe Hopper from Vietnam, right? These guys won the Medal of Honor. They were incredible. They also knew what the commander's intent was. They knew what the game plan was, and they were able to make adjustments in the field when all of the leadership above them went away. They were able to take action and get the job done. Hence their medals and decorations and whatnot. I mean, Audie Murphy was the most decorated soldier in World War II, and he was a private when he first got in, the notoriety. But he was the ranking guy. Everybody else above him was out of the picture, so he had to take over, and he knew what to do, and he knew how to do it. So again, if you want leaders at every level, you got to prepare for that. Right, that can't be an accident. And then don't force the guys who are not interested in leadership to be the leader, right?
Yeah.
Give them that other track. But for the ones that are on it, then I think you've got to create some kind of a leadership system that lets them know, what does a leader do here? How do you get measured as a leader? What does success look like, right? And is it really about you, or is it about your team that you're leading? If you think it's about you, you're probably mistaken, and you probably shouldn't be the person that we put in charge.
Right.
If you think it's about the team, and you're the coach and the head cheerleader for that team, you'll probably do great.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, you talked about that last point, the coaching and the head cheerleading. A thought just popped into my mind that often people that are perhaps in a leadership role that really aren't the most effective leaders, where they're overly critical of their people and, demanding and forcing and all of those things. Do you think that this is a thought that came to mind? That's how they treat themselves. So the byproduct is that's how they're treating the people underneath them, if you will. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it could be. It could also be that they grew up in a household where that was the family leadership style, I saw something last week, actually, Ben, that somebody had shared with me that said, we spend the first 18 years or so of our lives in a system that's sharing values and protocols and methodologies, and we think, okay, well, this is how my family does it, so everybody else probably does it that way too. Then you get out and you're like, wait, not everybody does it this way, right? Not everybody has different rules. Yep. Who knew, right? And then you spend the next 18 to 20 years of your life trying to figure out what the right rules for you ought to be.
You're right. Right. Yeah, it's a great point. It's a really great point. What do you do if you're listening, irrelevant to what kind of business you're in, but you're saying, I want to level up as a leader. I want to become more effective. And I know we don't have time to give them a whole book's worth of that, but maybe 2 or 3 key points that you would tell them, listen, if you're personally wanting to improve as a leader, here's some areas I would work on.
So I think a great book on this is called The Leadership Challenge by Kouzes and Posner. I'd go get that book right away. I keep copies of it and hand it out.
Okay.
And then for the other leaders that have been mistakenly put in those leadership, I have a different book that I hand out all the time called The No Asshole Rule.
Okay.
Jeffrey Pfeffer, and it's a great book. You just got to be careful, because those people that are using force, using that harsh, critical style, they're not going to get the results for you or your organization that you're looking for. Your peak of creativity and imagination and flow comes in environments that are safe, right? So people feel safe and protected and appreciated. They give you their best, right? When they feel like they're under threat, they give you their weakest. This is where this notion of quiet quitting comes from, or the disengaged, checked out employees. By the way, as we talked about before the show, you're seeing record levels of disengagement of employees, according to a recent Gallup poll. It's 25% of employees are engaged. The other 75% are checked out.
Wow.
What is going on, right?
Wow.
And what that tells me is there's ineffective leadership.
Yeah.
For those 75%, they're not being engaged. They don't feel safe. They're not bringing their A game and chomping at the bit to give you their peak of creativity and power. They are just trying to survive,
collecting a paycheck.
Yeah.
And that's a scary stat. I think if you're a leader in any organization, you're running a company, and to think that 75% of your people are disengaged, just showing up, what does that end up costing an organization? Right?
So you think about, why did I hire these people in the first place? Right. With yours, it's really kind of cool, right? If you're just saying, look, you're commission only. If you score, you win, and you eat what you kill. Yay, right? We both win when you score. That's right. And I don't pay you anything unless you score. Yay. This is a great model. Right. Unfortunately, a lot of people that are in jobs are going, no. I can't just eat what I kill. I got to have a regular paycheck coming in. Got to have those benefits. Right. And so and you're not holding me accountable to that commission type of plan where, it's really easy for you to see me creating value for you. You've got, a job description and a role for me that doesn't involve that kind of scorekeeping. It's got to involve some other kind of scorekeeping, but we're not real clear on that. And again, this is part of that contribution value challenge I was talking about early on. But now think about 75 or 3/4 of your employees are not really giving you their A game. They're just giving you a B or a C level game. Some of them are not even giving you that much. What does that equate to in terms of your ability as a company leader to get the max value out of the investment in those employees?
Yeah.
Well, it means you're not getting it, right? And yet you don't have to fire everybody and start over. You just got to lead differently.
Yeah.
And it's really easy, I think, to go and make that change. It's almost like the story of Scrooge, right? All of a sudden you have the epiphany from the ghost of Christmas past, present, future. Now you can go out and be happy and talk to your people. The more you sit down and talk to your people, the better you're going to create that safe environment for them that lets them, actually, I do want to give Ben my best. I do want to give Walt my best. He's talking to me. He's like a real guy. He loves me, right? He cares for me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why this is so frustrating in some ways, because leadership is really not that hard, but it's on the other side, it's impossible. You can't force, you've got to love. And that's what I mean is, if you're not willing to have faith in your people and faith in yourself that lets you rise above the ones that are hard to like sometimes, right? Sometimes people don't make it easy for you to love them.
Right.
But if you're their leader, you have to find it in yourself somehow and find it in them somehow to love them into the position or the type of engagement that you want from them. And that's why I said it's almost impossible, because most of us don't have that heart. We don't have that big of a spirit of grace and mercy, right? And we're like, hey, I'm here to get stuff done. Come on, get your butt in gear and let's go, right? And like, no, it's not a SEAL team, Walt, right? That's not what we're doing here, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think this is a big challenge, and for all of the folks in the audience, if you'd like to have more conversations, feel free to reach out through Ben, and he'll tell you how to get a hold of me. But it's not as hard as you think, but it is hard, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think anything worthwhile is, right. I mean, it's something that if you're going to become an effective leader and you're going to create change and lasting change, and whether that's a business, a corporation, a nonprofit, whatever it may be, is that to build anything great, it is difficult, right? I mean, it takes effort.
I'm going to say this because, even though you're technically a solopreneur almost, right? If you don't have any employees, right, you're the only guy in your shop, but you have these contractors, you're still on a team, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And I believe value creation is a team sport. And, in all of these years that I've been doing this kind of work, even the military, it's always a team sport. You may be the only one that goes on the mission today, but you got to thank all of those people that prepped you, all those people that made your gear, all those people that trained you and got you ready to go on that mission. Right? It's still a team sport, even though you're the only one going today.
Yeah.
Right. You're the only one jumping out of the jet today. Right. But bottom line, it's still a team sport, right? You didn't fly the jet up there to jump out. There's a pilot up there, right? So the more you start thinking about it, you go, oh yeah, everything's a team sport, and that means I got to work with people.
Yeah.
I need to figure this out. The other big aha for me was, you might be really smart, Walt, but you cannot be the only brain at work here. You cannot be the unimind for your whole team. You have got to get these other brains engaged in thinking and sorting out problems so you don't have to solve them all yourself. And if you don't want to be that guy that's busy whack-a-moling all the problems, you got to lead with the idea that these other people that I hired are actually pretty smart and capable, and I need to give them room to grow and use those skills and those brains of theirs to solve the problems that we collectively have to get solved in order to create this value together.
That's really well said. I think, holding people as able, holding them as capable, and giving them opportunities to learn and grow and make mistakes, and, know, like, as you mentioned earlier, that it's safe to be able to do it. I think that's, a hallmark of a great leader as well. And yeah, it's really great, man. It's really great. I love the leadership conversation. I know you mentioned it briefly, but let's even direct people to it. We'll put it in the show notes too, but where can people find you? Where could they connect with you?
So on Twitter, I'm Walt74 at Walt74. On LinkedIn, I'm Walter G. Carter, and you'll find me there. You can get me at my website, waltcarter.com. That's pretty simple, and and if you're looking for a speaker or somebody to come in and talk about these kinds of things. I love to talk about my military time. I've got a great talk on leadership lessons from the Cold War and nuclear silos. That's gone great for a bunch of companies. And I'm working on book number 2, and so be looking on Amazon for that one, along with We Can't Stay Here. If you're somebody that's leading change, or you've got somebody on your teams that you're trying to get into a position as a change leader, give them my book, because I wrote that book for me for 30 years ago, for the young me that was just starting out. I wish somebody had told me all this stuff, right? I didn't have to get all these scars for figuring it out the hard way.
Yeah.
Right. Because a lot of this is really about that human dynamic. It's not about how you do projects or product management. It's about how you lead people. And people are interesting, but they're very predictable in large numbers, and individually they're squirrelier than squirrels.
Let's close on this. I'm curious if you could give me a quick 30-second, 45-second, all the years of study, all the years of practice, all the years of teaching, the greatest leadership lesson you ever learned.
Was from a guy who is currently my father-in-law, has been my father-in-law for 34 years. He's also the best leader I ever worked for. And he said it real simply. Ben, he said, love them, then lead them. Wow. And this was a guy who was a wing commander in a nuclear missile business that basically said, you got to love them, then lead them. If you can't love them, you shouldn't be leading them. And he was responsible for the greatest turnaround that I've ever been part of. And this was long before I started dating his daughter. Right. I was a young lieutenant working in a missile wing, and man, he just did a knockout job of doing exactly what we've talked about. He walked around and he said, hey, what do you need that you don't have that would make you great at what you're doing? What if I can't get all of that, but I can only get a couple of things, right? What can you do with that, Ben? And then, a few days later, we're all at the base theater, the only building on base big enough to hold the wing. And he's up on stage without a single note card going, hey, Ben, stand up. Guys, a few weeks ago, I asked Ben, what did he need that he didn't have that would make him great at what he's doing? Here's what he did with the 2 things I was able to get him from headquarters, right? Ben, stand up. Everybody needs to see who you are. I'm very proud to tell everybody about what Ben Spangle's been doing for us. And, and he would move from one star to another star to another star. Within a few weeks, a couple of months, that whole wing would have followed him into hell with a teaspoon of water if he said we could douse the fires, right? And then within 2 years, we won every award that you can win for operational performance excellence, including the Department of Defense Best Base in the Air Force. I mean, within 2 years, we went from you guys shouldn't even be allowed to touch nuclear weapons to best base in all of the Department of Defense. And it was because he just was a humble leader that was asking and engaging people, just like we started out the conversation with. And if you just do those things, you'll get a lift. I guarantee you'll get a lift, right? If you do it as well as John did, you'll get a huge lift, and you'll get the biggest turnaround and engagement level that you've probably ever seen in your life.
What an amazing lesson. Thanks for sharing that story, and love them and then lead them. So great, Walt. I appreciate your time. It's been great spending this together. And everybody, I know you enjoyed today. And as always, make sure you share the episode, connect with Walt, connect with myself. If you're new to the show, click subscribe, leave us a quick review. And again, Walt, I appreciate your time. It's been fun having this conversation, and thanks again.
Likewise, Ben. Thank you so much for having me on today. I really enjoy your content, and I encourage everybody in your audience, go back and look at the other. Ben has a a capability of getting some of the smartest people in the world, not me, but all of his previous guests. You should listen to, because he's a great interviewer. He does a great job getting the most out of his guests. So I encourage you to go back and look at all those old videos.
Thanks, Walt. I appreciate it.